everybody, Dr. Tammy here from the Naked Doctor Show. I have a great video for you tonight. I'm going to be talking about cannabis and memory. So I'm writing a book right now with my buddy Corey, who has a lot of experience in the industry. And you know, I kind of never imagined that I would be talking this much about medical cannabis. And I think by now you guys know my story about my dad, and basically, you know, my dad had a seizure disorder, and I feel like the medications that he was on caused cancer, and one of the side effects is actually a couple of the medications is cancer. He got a rare form of lymphoma. He died when I was 19, and you know, I've kind of lived the last 30 years without my dad. So when I learned that that could have treated a seizure disorder, could have helped his anxiety, could have made our family life so much better, so much less stressful, really made me angry. It's kind of like when I learned about how hormones, natural hormone therapy could change my life. So I've kind of gotten a little bit on this soapbox about that, you know, and I don't mean to talk about this every single day, but I think it's an important topic. And a lot of doctors are still very fearful. They're working for hospitals or organizations that are saying, no, you can't do the certification letters, which is absolutely ridiculous. All they're doing is signing off saying that they certify that the person has one of the conditions that's approved by the state for medical cannabis. So, you know, I'm getting a whole lot of stories about people who've had resistance from different doctors and people who are treating. And, you know, there's a lot about cannabis that I didn't know, and I'm learning a lot from my patients as they come in. So I want to share 5 things with you specifically about memory, because I told you about my dad. Now I want to tell you about my mom. My mom is in assisted living right now. She has Alzheimer's, and I've always prayed to God, please let my mom remember me. So I've been really blessed that she still remembers who I am, but she will forget mid-sentence what we're talking about. And though she still remembers me and can sometimes still remember things from her very distant past, it's very uncomfortable. And you know, my mom has rheumatoid arthritis. She has a lot of conditions that I truly believe that this could help. Now I have this little glitch because she is in assisted living about who's going to actually administer the medicinal cannabis to her if we get her approved. So I'm not sure how that's going to work just yet. So I'm going to have some conversations with her care home, her caregivers, and see if that's a possibility. I really hope that it will be. You know, I may have to look at other options about home care or something like that, because I really think this is fascinating. And one of the myths about cannabis that was created to keep the stigma going, that was created to keep the myths and the fear and the propaganda going, is that it causes memory problems. And while it is true, when you are actually smoking or using cannabis with a high THC content, if you're quote stoned or high, I call it the catnip for human, the THC cannabinoid that's in the cannabis plant, you do kind of have trouble tracking sometimes. And so high THC can cause some short-term memory deficits. But the myth is that if you use it long term, parents have used this myth for a long time to tell their kids that it'll destroy their memory, they'll never be able to go to college, you know, they'll just be stoners, and that is actually not true. And again, while you acutely use cannabis with a high THC content, you can have that effect, but it goes away immediately after you have that stoned effect go away. And remember, I said that THC and the other cannabinoids like CBD have different percentages and components. So a high THC can be very problematic acutely for memory. Now, if you stay high or stoned on THC all day long, yeah, over time, you know, it would appear that you have memory issues or whatever, or don't really care. But so I want to talk about the effects specifically on memory, and these were studies all done in Alzheimer's patients. Now remember, because it's been a Schedule 1 up there with heroin and ecstasy, it hasn't really been studied much in the US, so it's been studied in other countries. So we don't have a lot of data here in the US, but it's been studied extensively, tens of thousands of articles in other countries. And this plant, the cannabis plant, is something that's been around, they think 2000 BC. So, I mean, it's been around forever. So I just want to talk about some of the studies and the effects on memory. So number one, The THC component in this mixture, basically, in cannabis, slows the buildup of something called amyloid neural plaques. Now, here's my little disclaimer. We're going to get into a little nerdy science tonight. Absolutely love the nerdy science. I can't get enough of this when I'm reading. So what the heck is an amyloid neural plaque? I'm going to make sure I'm recording here. Fabulous. Okay, because sometimes it doesn't always record sometimes. An amyloid neural plaque is, if you were to look at a brain cell under a microscope, and it has all these little dendrites coming off of the axon, and it connects within the brain, the gray matter, the white matter, and then all the way down the neural network into the extremities. Basically what it does is, over time, they think with different toxins, they think with different environmental and genetic components, that you actually start to build up. Let me see if I got a different color here so I can kind of make this a little visual for you. Starts to build up these plaques on here, kind of like, almost like plaques in the arteries that can cause heart attacks or strokes, but these little amyloid plaques that actually accumulate on the nerves so that the conduction can't actually happen. Now, if that happens in an area like the hippocampus, where, you know, the memory is stored, or especially emotional memories, that can really impact things like Alzheimer's, dementia, or things, you know, other conditions that are affected with memory. And there's different kinds of dementia, so I'm not going to go into all those different types, like Lewy body dementias and things like that, but they all have some component of these plaques in there. So there's a study done in 2008. It was done in Molecular Pharmaceutics, and a study done in 2014, the Journal of Alzheimer's, which is a very well-respected medical journal, peer-reviewed, and you know, that it's kind of hard to get published in some of these journals like the AMA and things like that, so peer-reviewed. And basically what they found in both these studies was that THC inhibits something called ACHE, which is basically a chemical that induces these amyloid beta plaques. So it actually inhibits the plaque formation, and it's more effective than different prescription meds. They studied something called diazepam, which is actually called Aricept, if you've heard of that, and Tacrin, which is called Namenda. So my mom is on both Namenda and Aricept, and so she's on pharmaceuticals right now, which have kind of slowed down, and I also have her on a ton of supplements and hormones and stuff like that. But I really believe that this, you know, could slow more plaque formation as well. So that's very interesting. It stops the buildup of this plaque. Okay, number two, it fights inflammation. And now we know part of what Alzheimer's or memory problems is almost like a type 3 diabetes, meaning it's an insulin or a glucose utilization problem in the brain. The blood sugar is not distributed properly, and they think that there's an inflammation component to that. Tons of studies support that. So I always tell people the biggest cause of inflammation is, you know, if you're worried about a heart attack or stroke, you shouldn't be worried about your cholesterol levels. You should be worried about inflammation. And the number one cause of inflammation is high sugar content in the diet. So I've done a ton of videos on sugar and the insidiousness of sugar in the American Western diet. So you really have to be informed to know what sugar is doing to us and causing inflammation. But it's also the inflammation around these amyloid plaques that kind of compresses them in, that makes these plaques even more problematic. It's almost like having, you know, Play-Doh that's around your nerve networks, and then you put a tourniquet over it, and then you pull the tourniquet tight. That's what inflammation does. So it really stops those pathways, you know. And sometimes when I'm talking to my mom, sometimes it almost feels like a computer program. Like I can almost see the little glitches happening. Yes, she's trying to remember something and she's repeating something over and over and over. You know, she just kind of gets stuck in these pathways, and I can almost, like, my nerdy brain just goes to like seeing these plaques just being stretched tight like a rubber band. So there was a study done in 2006 in the Neuroscience magazine, again, another very well-respected AMA type journal, that showed, you know, I talk about the endocannabinoid system a lot with the CBI and all the different receptor sites. You know, they've got two main known receptor sites. And what they found in this study, now they studied mice, because, you know, a lot of these studies are done on animals since they didn't have humans. But what they found was mice without the CBI receptors had an increase in cognitive decline. So they actually found that THC and CBD could reduce the inflammation by affecting the endocannabinoid receptor sites. So that's very exciting for inflammation, but this also, not just with memory, but with potentially heart attacks and strokes and things like that. And people are always really worried about, using medical cannabis, and are there side effects? Could it actually hurt you? And it actually can decrease the inflammation, which decreases your risk. I also feel, I'll just inject a little personal belief here, that because THC has an effect on anxiety and it tends to calm people if it's used in the right ratios, in the right way, in the right person, right? That's different for everybody, which the dispensaries will be able to help you with. But if it's used in the right amounts, in the right strains, because there's different strains that are more activating and more sedating. So if you use it in the right way, if you use it to bring the anxiety down, a lot of what we know about stress and cortisol production on the brain, more cortisol, more stress actually causes melting of the brain cells. And so over time, they've shown brain scans, PET scans, MRI scans of different patients that had high levels of perceived stress, and their brains literally look like they're melted from that cortisol effect. So just another benefit of kind of the calming that anxiety, takes that inflammation down, takes the cortisol down. Had to inject a little bit of hormone there, right? Number 3, CBD, which is one of the other cannabinoids. Cannabinoids actually prevent cell death. This is what we call neuroprotection. So for people who've been telling, their kids or whatever, and I'm not telling you that it's okay if your kids, smoke marijuana or whatever, or use cannabis. I am saying that know your science and talk to your kids and tell them that some people do use this as medicine. It's still illegal, recreational. Have that conversation with them, but tell them not to judge unless they know the true science behind this stuff. And maybe you consider maybe not judging so much, but actually it is neuroprotective. There was a study done in 2004, a study done in 2009, and if you want these actual articles, I can send them to you because I have them, I've reviewed them, I've read them pretty much top to bottom, and I can send them to you if you want. But basically they found that there was a synergistic effect between THC and CBD, and that there was neuroprotection in something called the anti-glutamatergic effect. So it actually works as an antioxidant. Everybody's kind of familiar with like vitamin C and vitamin E, how they work as antioxidants. I will inject that I talked to a guy this past week who is an expert in cancer, treating cancer with cannabis, and he was telling me that sometimes there's a synergistic effect between these two, and sometimes there's an antagonistic effect. So depending on the cancer, depends on what you want to use. So for people who have said that they had cancer and they just used, I always say Joe down the street, Joe, marijuana salesperson who's just growing whatever strain in their backyard, they might not have been using the right strain or the right combination. And so there are a lot of people who say, well, yeah, my cousin smoked medical cannabis and, they didn't get any better with their cancer or whatever. It's probably because they didn't know the right strains to use in combination. So there's a ton of research on that. But this anti-glutamatergic effect basically keeps these cells from dying. And there's something called programmed cell death, where the cell actually is programmed to die when it has gone beyond its age. And actually our bodies turn over about every 2 years. We used to think that neurons in the brain never change, never die. You have the same neurons, the same brain that you were born with. That's not true at all. Just like your skin cells turn over about every 2 years, every cell in your body turns over, even your fat cells, which is important for weight loss, but I'm not going to go into that conversation. But this neuroprotective effect actually can help with this stimulating the cell growth, and it's called neurogenesis, so it actually makes new brain cells. So that myth that we've had for years about, these stoners basically cooking their brains is not true at all. Actually, their brains are probably healthier from the neurogenesis that happens in there. So it encourages the death of unhealthy cells. We call that apoptosis, and it actually helps grow new healthy cells. And that was a study done in 2007, a study done in 2011. So those were also in neurology journals. And then the other, last one, number 5, is other symptoms. So a lot of times, like with my mom, I see the women in her unit basically in the assisted living, and she has kind of like a little apartment, but they all have like shared communal space where they eat. And I see all these women and they're picking at their food. They have no appetite. My mom has no appetite. She's lost probably 30 pounds in the last 2 years. You know, she just, part of that brain is just not working properly. And so one of the things in different combinations now, some THC and CBD can cause weight loss or appetite suppression, and some can cause you to get the munchies and make you more hungry. Higher THC usually does that. So, you know, a CBD might be great for my mom to help her increase her appetite a little bit so she doesn't waste away, basically. Motor function, you know, my mom is in a wheelchair because she broke her hip a couple of times, and so she can't ambulate anymore. And even if she tries, she's really weak, and her motor function is not so good. So if that improved her motor function, if she could walk, she would have so much more independence to move around. We could go shopping more. We could go to the casino more. There's so much more we could do. She has a little bit of anxiety, especially what they call sundowner syndrome. So she gets a little anxious in the evening. So I always try to call in the evenings and kind of talk her down before bed, make sure she's okay. But it would help with that. And then agitation and pain. My mom has rheumatoid arthritis, so she has a lot of pain. She's really crippled up, so her hands are kind of twisted this way. So as far as other symptoms, some combination of THC or CBD might be just the ticket for her. So I'm very excited what the future could potentially hold for my mom. And I hope, you know, she's 82, her health is relatively good physically except for pain, and she's, you know, losing her appetite and kind of wasting away a little bit. And her memory, you know, is pretty stable right now. But I'm hoping that by the time this gets going, and that I could potentially get her some help that could help her, because nothing else is. She's on all these Alzheimer's medications, you know, she's on all these supplements, and I'm hoping that I'm not standing here in front of you a year from now, 2 years from now saying, you know, my mom just missed the window and didn't get the potential help she needed, just like my dad. So that's, you know, everything happens for a reason. But I truly hope that that's not going to be my story, you know, later on, that this could have actually helped her sooner or helped her better. So again, I'm not making an argument that you go tell minors that it's okay, that it's not going to affect their memory or that kind of thing. I'm just saying be empowered, do the research, look at the articles, make sure you know what you're saying when you buy into the propaganda that everybody's trying to say about cannabis, the plant. And let's change the terminology. You know, I keep saying that. Let's not call it marijuana or pot or hash or whatever. Let's call it medical cannabis in Arkansas, because that's what's been legalized. And people can actually use this as medication. So let's use it for what it has its potential use for. Let's not abuse it. You know, it didn't go legal for recreational. I'm not making a judgment whether that's right or wrong, but it did get approved for medical. So let's just do our research. Let's empower ourselves. Let's be smart. Let's use some common sense, and let's have these conversations. If you guys have questions, please feel free to inbox me if you want the research. I'm glad to share that. I love y'all very much, and I just want to help patients as much as I can. I'm trying to fill a gap because everyone's still scared right now. So if you want to come see me for an evaluation, I'd be glad to have that conversation with you and see if this might be right for you. So our office number, I'll post it on there. You can call and get an appointment if you want. But if you've stayed on the video this long, please click the share button and show some love and tell your friends. I do these Facebook Live videos free every day, just trying to educate and share, and know they're not always cannabis videos. I do a lot on hormones and wellness, so lots of great stuff. You guys let me know what you want me to share with you or talk about. I love to do new research and look up new things. So don't forget to watch our show, The Naked Doctor Show, on Mondays and Tuesdays at 12:30 in the afternoon, and after Saturday Night Live on KNWA on Saturday nights. Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Mwah.